intellectual life in America, certainly in the end of the 19th century, was not primarily rooted in the university. Even if you go back to the origins of philosophy before the pragmatists, when people were reading Hegel and Kant, very frequently they were informal groups like the Ohio Hegelians, these were doctors and lawyers and people working in public affairs. Increasingly, it's become the case that there's very little space in this country for a person who is interested in intellectual ideas if he or she is not associated with the university. And that's part of the story of professionalization.
I think that the role of the philosopher in American life has changed quite a bit.
There used to be a time, even in my lifetime, where there could be people in publishing. There were serious journalists, like a Walter Lippmann, and so forth, who was terribly intelligent. You had figures like a Reinhold Niebuhr, who could write for the public, before he got a university position, when he was just a preacher. This hardly exists in America now.
If you look at the place that Emerson held.
Ralph Waldo Emerson, whom I regard as the quintessential American philosopher.
Emerson in his day became a widely read author.
He wasn't a world traveler initially.
But he was not a wealthy man. His father died when he was 9. He and his brother had to share a coat, in the sense that one day one would wear it to school and the other day another would wear it to school.
He seems to be, even on his own account, a kind of a tame, withdrawn kid.
He was, I think, 5th in the line of ministers in the Unitarian Church, and went to Harvard College and trained to be a minister, went to the divinity school.
He was part of the center, of the Unitarian world. He was the minister of the Second Church of Boston. Big deal, but he didn't want to administer communion, but he couldn't do it. He didn't hear that message, so he gives it up.
He explains that his problem was that he didn't think that he could be the intermediary between the divine and human beings, and that's the position that he was supposed to be placed in by his position in the institution of the church.
What he does is he gives up the ministry to become the writer that he was, and he decided that because this is the core of the divinity school address is about, I can't do that old theological stuff in that way any longer. I'm going to continue to preach. Now with small p in quotation marks, but I'm going to do it from my own divine sources and tell my own stories. So that's the experience that really drove him.
If there's one categorical imperative in Emerson's thought, it is that the development of an original relation to the universe is a moral requirement for any persons or any people who would live a truly meaningful and worthwhile existence.
So he created a new profession for himself, or entered a profession that was developing then, that of the Lyceum speaker and lecturer.
There wasn't a sense of philosophy as a distinctive profession. We sometimes forget that 2 of the people that we recognize as the greatest of American philosophers, Peirce and James, never had formal training in philosophy. And there clearly is a sense of a kind of the role of the intellectual dealing with a whole variety of issues and with the span of culture, so that the kind of now professionalism, which is so characteristic today of philosophy, was simply non-existent at that time.
William James in 1904 delivered these popular talks to 1,000, later published as the volume Pragmatism. And this is he thought he was developing a method that could be used by all thinkers to make clearer what they were trying to say.
These grand traditions of people arguing about all kinds of issues and reading books. I don't mean the books that just come out in Barnes and Nobles, but serious books was common.
I just don't think that there are any philosophers who have that kind of impact. Some have set out to.
Philosophy is an activity done by professionals for professionals. And part of the endeavor of the APA was to bring this about. One of the places where you can see it very explicitly is in Lovejoy's presidential address. So we're about 1915, 1916. He gives his presidential address that philosophy needs to start thinking about making progress and to stop resolving old issues that we just can't really answer. And if they turn out to be unsolvable, then we should dump them as being badly formulated and get better problems. His belief was that philosophy, if it's ever going to make any progress, is going to have to get out of the edification racket, sort of making people feel good and sort of Emersonian stuff, I guess, and start thinking about solving problems. And this, of course, is a nice physics, math model for how a humanities discipline should be run. And it's completely inaccurate. New issues come up, we think about ways of dealing with them. But you never get to the point where this particular issue is now buried. And that was one of Lovejoy's examples. He said, we thought we killed this one. Then it came back. We thought we had finished it up. And we buried it, and now it's back here again. What are we going to do? What's wrong with us? So one of the sentences goes something like, what kind of a business is this in which experts can't agree on fundamental issues? And again, you can sort of compare this in your mind. Well, in medicine, if we had fundamental issues in medicine that people couldn't agree on, we could at least figure out a way to come to agreement.
Doctor, this whole business has me all upset. Can you prescribe something for me? A tranquilizer, perhaps?
But philosophers can't do this. So some people think that there is a God, and some people think that everyone is predetermined, and some people... And we can't seem to solve any of this.
Medicine helps sometimes, but let's wait a while. You may not need anything once you understand what's bothering you. All right.
And consequently, we need to do something else that we can solve and get rid of these sorts of issues. Yeah.
And it's become such a Mandarin discipline. Such a Mandarin discipline. Philosophers talking to other philosophers, bottled up in their little world, their little bubble of what constitutes the dominant members of the APA. And there are enough members of the APA to have a flourishing publishing industry, just, publishing for each other, as long as publishers are willing to be content with a non-random house, a non-random house existence. But the field has been pretty well spoiled in many respects.
Philosophy goes on being very technical, very professional, very narrow, but there are also a group of thinkers who I think are much broader than that. And my sympathies are with those who are much broader.
We as philosophy teachers have to open up what we take to be philosophy and get people to ask even more questions than they have. It's strange that philosophers, when they talk about their work, often say that we're ignored, right? At the University of Oregon last year, we had 3,000 students in philosophy classes. 3,000 out of 20,000 students came through our classrooms, right? That's a lot of people. And we had the opportunity over the course of the year with those students in our classroom to get them to step back and reflect on the commitments they've made, the commitments society makes, and so on. It's not the case that we're not listened to. I mean, the fact is, if philosophy departments are teaching students, and especially if they're teaching a lot of students in a way that engage them and bring them back, and when the student walks out of the class, they're asking questions they weren't asking before, we're having an effect. The fact that we don't have, our journals aren't read by, 1 of 4 Americans is okay. Because in a lot of ways, we have people in interaction with us on a much bigger level, because we talk to them for weeks and weeks and weeks. And they come out often remembering philosophy classes as the moment in their college education where something different happened. So we can't underplay the impact of philosophy.